you? You're worthless and weak. You do nothing. You are nothing. You sit in here all day and play that sick, repulsive, electric twanger. What do you want to do with your life?
I want to rock.
Hey there, guys. It's been a while, but I think I finally managed to get some time to do our next how-to video. And this time it's going to be setting up the basic FiveM server from scratch on a Windows machine, in this case a VPS. Graciously provided by the guys on my desktop there. Thanks to GG Hosting for allowing me a VPS to do these videos on. If you're in need of one, give them a shot at that URL, and I think you still get a 10% discount on the setup if you use the promo code SCHWIM, SCHWIM as in Michael. All right, so let's get down to the nuts and bolts. I showed you on the Linux videos where for the most part you work in, well, for the entire thing you work in the terminal. You don't really get a desktop to work in, so you work at the command line throughout the whole process. And with a Windows VPS, it's the complete opposite. You'll be in a graphical environment pretty much the whole time, and it's like working, if you use Windows as your operating system, it's like working from your seat and keyboard at home. There's really no difference. So we're in the Windows VPS. We're connecting through RDP, which stands for Remote Desktop Protocol. It's the built-in kind of remote session that Windows offers. So if you're on your machine at home and you've been provided the credentials for your Windows VPS, it'll be the IP and the username and password. You just type in RDP or remote into your Windows start menu, and it'll bring up the Remote Desktop Protocol app, and you just enter your credentials and your connection IP into that, and you end up with somewhat like what we're looking at, which is a remote session into the Windows machine. So you can see it's pretty bare bones. This is the one I've used for both the FTP server setup that I showed, as well as setting up a WAMP server, which is your Apache. So we'll go ahead and start that, because we will need that at some point for our MySQL setup. But for now, I'm just going to show you how to work in the remote VPS. If you've set up a FiveM server home hosted on your machine at home, this is going to look ridiculously familiar to you. Because you're basically doing the same thing just in a remote environment. And you can do it a lot of ways. You can work entirely in the remote session, so you can open up a browser on that remote machine, visit all the websites we need to visit, download the files, they'll go to that VPS, and then you'll do everything from the remote machine. But you can also do it a bunch of different ways. You can use the FTP server that we set up in another video, and you can connect via FTP to get files to this machine. Or with Remote Desktop Protocol, you just copy and paste. You can open up a file manager on your local machine, right click and copy, or Control C a folder or file, and then open up a File Explorer on the remote machine, Control V, and you'll get that file that you copied on your local machine. So there's just a ton of ways to skin the cat, and they're all fairly simple. But what we're going to do is we're we're going to work entirely on the remote machine. So the very first thing we're going to do is we are going to open up the document at FiveM that kind of walks you through setting up a machine, and that's docs.fivem.net. And if you go there, you just want to go to running a server, getting started. And looking at this, it walks you through the process. And if you don't have to listen to my long-winded ass tell you how to do stuff, you can do this entire process in under 5 minutes. It's just super simple. So the first thing is the prerequisites. You have to install the Visual C++ redistributable 2019 or newer. So those links will lead you to that. I won't go through it because we did it when we set up the web server and MySQL server on this machine. But you have to have that installed. Now, step 2, I'm skipping. I don't use Git to retrieve the artifacts files, just because I don't update without testing it on another machine, so there's never a time I need to pull it straight from their GitHub. So we're just going to deal with step 1, and then we're going to head down here, okay? And I already have a folder called FiveM, because that's the folder that we set up the FTP server to use. And it's going to tell me that I need to download the latest artifacts for Windows, and we'll open that in a new tab, and you can see that the latest is 1312. So if you click on that latest, you'll see you get a zip. So we're going to go ahead and download that server zip, and then we are going to open it, and I will show you what we kind of like the folder structure I like to use to make this as simple as possible. While we're waiting for Windows to verify that file, I'll go ahead and talk about the next one. Once you've got the artifacts, you're also going to need, oh, there we go. All right, so we're going to go to extract. We're going to extract all, and we're going to browse. We'll go to FiveM, and here's how I like to set this up. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to create a new folder called artifacts. And then in there, we're going to create one more folder named 1312. And this is how I keep my artifacts in line when I'm running a server. If I want to try a new set of artifacts, an upgraded version on my server, I will put them in a new folder relating to that new artifact number. And that allows me to start the server with those other artifacts, those later artifacts, and if there's ever an issue, I just roll back and choose the older artifact server folder, and I can be back up and running with the older artifacts immediately. I don't have to back up a file or folder and then reinstate it. It just automatically does it. So we're going to go ahead and select this folder where to put the artifacts. And we'll run an extract on that, and you'll see that it puts everything, the artifacts, it's kind of confusing. The artifacts don't show up in a folder. They're just out in the open, so you got to put them in a containing folder. The server data, however, does show up in a folder, so we'll do that a little bit different. So what you want to do is open up the server data link, and it'll bring you to the GitHub, and we're going to go ahead and download the zip, and we'll open that up, and you can see that shows up in a very verbose, long-winded folder name. So we're going to go ahead and extract that to our FiveM folder. We don't need to put it inside anything else. We'll select that, we'll extract, and then when it shows it to us, we're going to go ahead and rename it. So we're going to rename that to just server data. All right, so that gives us the basic files that we need. And then what we're going to do is go back to the documentation, and we are down to 5. So we're going to use 5, and you're going to see that it gives you a server config to start with. So we'll go ahead and copy this, and we are going to need to create a folder or create a file with this. So we'll do Control-N for new file, Control-V to paste, and there's only a few things you have to do to this for the most part. This, unless you're running more than one server on the machine, you can leave the same, okay? 3120 is the port that the game runs on. That's the default port, so if you don't enter a port when you join a game, like in the server browser in your client, it chooses 3120 as the default. All the zeros just means that it will scan across all the local IPs, the internal IPs to bind to, so you don't have to enter your local IP into this. Just use the 4 zeros, leave those the same, leave the port the same unless you're changing that. These are the default FiveM resources. That's what it has to have to run. Well, doesn't have to have like scoreboard, but that's the default resources. You should always in a live server leave script hook disabled. There's a lot of problems with well, just a lot of script kiddie shit with menus that they can bypass stuff and generate money and cars and screw with your server. They can do that even with it disabled. With it enabled, it's pointless to even try to stop them. So keep that disabled all the time. Archon password. If you don't know what Archon is, you don't need it. You can leave it commented out. Okay, Archon just means remote console, and it allows you to do things remotely that you can do in F8 console in game. So restart a resource, stop a resource, refresh. You can screw with a server if you're able to connect remotely through Archon. So if you don't need it, leave it commented out. You'll see sometimes in the server terminal where it spits out incorrect, Archon password or something like that. And what that means is someone's running a script to try to brute force or guess your Archon password so they can screw with your server. There's nothing to worry about as long as this is commented out, or you've got a very complex password that can't be like a dictionary attack done on it with common words and stuff. So if you see that in your server terminal, you can completely ignore it, provided you've got this commented out or you've got a really good password. All right, stuff like the tags, those are things that show up when you look in the server browser. So, like roleplay, comma, cars, comma, realistic, things like that. Like a little description comment words that you would use for your server, like keywords. And then the next two that are commented out are how you show those pretty nifty banners, both on server browser. When you look at a server and you see that really neat looking banner, like right above all the names of the players connected, that's your first one. And then when you connect to a server, you see another banner that's there until it loads in the loading screen of the server. That's your second one, your banner connecting. So you could set a URL to either of those. You can change them. You can upload them to like Imager or an image hosting service, or if you've got a website, you can load them there and just point to them with these and make sure you remove the comments. And then the next one is the name of the server, the thing that shows up when people see your server in the server browser. So we can put the name of your server there. Nested configs, you can call additional config files from this one just by linking them. So you execute the server internal config. That's commented out. You likely don't need it. What I do with our servers is I like to put cars in their own config, planes in their own, boats in their own, and it allows me to kind of keep our server config file clean and easy to track without having to go through, 50 cars or whatever. So that handles that. Your server icon, you just put that in the root directory. Your server icon would show up in server data, like right here, and you would put the file name right there. If you want that round kind of icon to show up. Convars, variables that you can load into the server config. These are just all examples to show you the different things you can do in the server config. This stuff is not needed. All right, and if you want people to see your server in the server browser and be part of that list, you leave this commented out. If you remove this comment, then it tells the server browser not to include you, and you will be invisible to players. They can still connect directly. They just cannot see you in the server browser. If they did a search for nifty FiveM, it wouldn't show up. And down here is the system admin. So it uses the Steam identifier as an admin identifier. And I'm going to show you how to get this particular Steam identifier. If you look at most of the websites that provide Steam IDs, it will not show you this hex version, and you won't be able to connect. But we're going to go ahead, and there is a website. If you look up VAC band, you will see VAC status lookup. So this is a website designed to show you if a Steam ID has been banned. We're going to use it just to get the hex ID. So if I put in my Steam username, it will show me the different identifiers. And the one we want is where it says hex. So you're going to copy from here over to the front, copy it. We're going to go back to our editor, and we are going to remove all the way to that leading one, but you need to make sure that you keep the Steam and colon there. So we're going to paste that, okay? That means I will be allowed to run commands that are restricted to admin when this server starts. Here's a fun fact. Even though FiveM is telling you that this is how they determine who's an admin and who's not, there's a thread currently on the FiveM forums where their hack workaround for retrieving player Steam IDs is likely going to be blocked in the next Steam update, and they're not sure if they'll be able to get back the ability to get the Steam ID. So things like this will break. If you're running an ESX server or a VRP server, anything that relies on the Steam ID, which those entirely do, all of that will break because none of that stuff, including what the FiveM group is adding here, relies on the license, game license. It relies on the Steam ID. But for now, we're safe to put it in and it'll work. It's just a fingers crossed type of thing, whether it'll continue working or whether things will have to change. So if you are viewing this video in the future and your server config doesn't include the Steam ID, then you're likely going to be asked to put in your game license, which you can also find through your Rockstar editor. Or not editor, but the Rockstar game manager. All right, this next one is player endpoints, whether you want to hide them or not. And all that means is whether you're going to hide the IPs of the players that are connecting. And here's kind of why that's important. When your server starts, it creates two files that are accessible via a web browser, a web connection. And one of them is called info.json, and then one of them is called players.json. Those are files that are used by FiveM to show the players that are online on your server at the time. The server browser connects to those files, and it gets all the important information like your the little icon that we show up here, the players' names and the number of players that are connected to your server. And one of the things that can be passed is the player IPs. And you likely don't need it. There are certain times that you do, though. Like I wrote a web panel that requires the endpoint to be displayed if you want to see them in the world map. So mine is set to false, so I don't hide those IPs. What that means is you are sharing your players' IPs with an openly accessible URL. So if you're a privacy minded individual, you would leave this to true. If you need those IPs for some reason, for some kind of resource you've installed or web panel management thing, then you may have to set that to false. And server player slot limit, okay? The max player limit right now for anyone who does not pay FiveM their Patreon $15 or more monthly subscription, the max players you can have is 32. There's a system called OneSync, which is in development right now, and people who are part of their Patreon group can enable OneSync, which allows you to have as many as 64 players. So you can enable this to be 64 if you are a Patreon subscriber of the $15 tier or more. However, if you are not, you have to keep this at 32, and you have to keep in mind that even if you are, but you plan on running a framework like ESX or VRP, those frameworks are not ready for it. There's a lot of hard-coded loops in the ESX resources that specifically look for the max of 32 characters or players, so it will break ESX if you enable anything higher than 32. You'll want to wait for that stuff to get worked out, the kinks worked out, before you set it up for more than 32. And the final thing we will add will be the license key, and that's at keymaster.fivem.net, and you will see the ability, once you sign in with your forum identity, you will see the ability to add a key, or just grab one of the keys that you already have. So we'll go ahead and copy this, and we will put it right here. Okay. And once you've done that, you want to save that file as server.cfg in the server data folder. So once you've done that, go ahead and close that out. And what we're going to do is we are going to go back to the documentation. And you can see that we have made it all the way to step 8. So it's time to start the server. You've pretty much done everything you need to do. So to start the server, what you do is you hit your Windows key, type in cmd, and it's going to bring up a terminal window, or what they call in Windows a command prompt window. So they're going to tell you that you have to change directory. That's what CD stands for. You can ignore that /D. It's a drive change type of thing, and since we're working on our C drive, we don't have to do any changes. But what we're going to do is go ahead and do C:// FiveM / server data. So no matter where you installed all your stuff, you have to change directory to where we saved server.cfg. That's the important bit. Doesn't matter what folders you put it in. You want to change directory to that before we run the next command. And then we'll talk something else about folders. You'll see that when I create folders or files, they're always lowercase and they never have spaces in them. And the reason for that is computer terminals and command prompts often don't know how to handle a space. It considers a space a break for whatever you were typing, and then anything that comes after it is a new argument. So when you create your files and folders for this type of stuff, it is always best, number one, keep everything lowercase, and number two, always use hyphens or underscores in lieu of spaces, because you'll get weird errors. You won't know why you get them, and a lot of times that's the reason why. So that's why when you see me naming stuff, it's always done that way. And the last thing we're going to do is we are going to start the server. So we are going to do C:// FiveM / artifacts / let me make sure I got the 1312 was the name of the artifact version. So we're in that folder now. We're going to type in run.cmd and then space and then a + exec, no space between the + and the exec, space server.cfg. You hit enter and the magic happens. And that's it. Your server is running now. Everything's done. You can connect to it either locally if you're running a machine home hosted on the same as you got your client, you're done. But here's one thing left we have to do for you to be publicly accessible on the web. Okay, we're going to go ahead and shut down that command, and we're going to go to our Windows firewall. So we're going to go ahead and open our firewall, and here's the thing you have to do, otherwise no one will be able to connect outside of this machine. So go to inbound rules. You're going to make a new rule, okay, and we're going to choose port. We're going to have to do this 4 times, 4 different times, so pay attention to all 4 you have to do. TCP and then specific ports. You want to enter 30110, 30120. Now, here's the caveat. If you chose a different game port than 30120, you put that there instead of what I put. You still put the 3110. That's the heartbeat port to let the server tell FiveM that it's alive. The 3120 would be changed to whatever port you want your server to run on. And that also means if you add servers down the road with a different port, you need to come back here and modify these rules. But for now, 3120. We're going to hit next. We are going to allow the connection. We're going to hit next, leave all 3 of those checked, hit next, and then what we're going to do is FiveM TCP inbound and then hit finish. And then we'll create one new inbound rule, one more inbound rule, and we're going to hit port. You do the same thing. The only difference is we choose UDP now for specific ports, 30110, 30120. hit next, and allow the connection. Leave all three checked. FiveM UDP inbound. Finish. Your inbound rules are done. We're going to go to outbound rules. We're going to create a new rule, and we're going to do port again, and you do the exact same thing outbound that you did inbound. TCP 30110, comma 30120. Hit next. Allow the connection. Now this will default to block the connection. We want to make sure it allows the connection. Leave all three checked. FiveM TCP outbound. You'll have to excuse me. My fingers don't work this morning. All right. And then we have one more to do outbound. So port next. UDP instead of TCP. 30110, comma 30120. Hit next. We are going to allow the connection. We're going to leave all three checked. FiveM UDP outbound. Finish. All right. Now that that's done, everything is ready for you to be publicly accessible on a VPS. However, if you are home hosting and you have your computer along with other computers behind a router, you will likely have to port forward from that router to your computer. And what that means is you put in your router anytime an outward connection tries to get to port 3110 or 3120. It needs to forward those requests to the computer you're running the game server on. Otherwise, the router does not know where that data needs to go. So you need to look up specific for your router. I can't show you how to do it because the menus are all different on different routers. You need to look up for your particular router model how to port forward, and you need to forward those ports, both TCP and UDP, both inbound and outbound, to the machine you're running the game server on, the local IP that your game server is running on. So once you've done it, you go back here, you're going to change directory to your game server, server data directory, and you're going to start the server, and you will be accessible to all the world with your FiveM setup. And that is that. You are done. And the next video we will do before setting up an ESX server on a Windows VPS will be managing your game server in a little bit more friendly manner than opening that command prompt and doing everything through that. So we will deal with that next time. But for now, I wish you the best of luck in running your game server, and I hope you guys have a great time doing it. I'll talk to you next time.